About 20 years ago now, I was lucky enough to attend some of the events that were part of the very first Zero One Festival. If you've never heard of Zero One, it's an organization that was founded by a tech marketing executive to explore how the intersection of technology and art can combine to create social change. Now, at that festival, I remember hearing someone speak about the importance of creativity. And one of his points was that there are a diminishingly small number of completely new inventions, right? Rather than creating something new, the real innovators now are people who are making what we already have better. So, for example, right, the creator of the spork didn't invent utensils, didn't come up with a pronged fork or scoop spoon. Their innovation was to combine the fork and the spoon for something practical and flexible to use on the go. Similarly, you take the wheel, right? Fantastic, fabulous, history altering invention. Um, but mostly because of all of the innovative uses that people have come up with for the wheel, right? To turn it into a potter's wheel, to make art, or to make functional containers, to turn it into the wheels on a chariot, right? That leads to vehicles and locomotion, to put a whole bunch of wheels together to create gears that work any number of machines. Hello. I am Nicole Dravillas-Frabel, and this is Wildwood Teaching. And today I am talking about the importance of nurturing creativity in children and how nature-based teaching can be your starting point. So you've probably heard about the paperclip test. If you haven't, right, the paperclip test was originally developed in the 1960s by some researchers working for NASA, because NASA wanted an employment screening device, right? We want to send people into space. We want to explore frontiers that people have never imagined before. And so we need scientists who can dream up things that have never been dreamed up before. People who can think outside the box. And so what their test was to present people with a simple paperclip and ask them to list every different way they could think of to use a paperclip. And then they scored it some way and gave people levels of thinking. And later on, the researchers decided that they wanted to take this test into the general population. And so they tested a bunch of 5-year-olds, and they found that 98% of those 5-year-olds scored at the genius level of creativity. Then they went back and tested those same children 5 years later. And those same children, when they were 10, 30% of them tested at the genius level for creativity. Again, another 5 years goes by, and they test those children at age 15, and now they have 12% testing at the genius level. When they tested those 15-year-olds, they tested a separate adult population and found that 2% of the general adult population tests at the creative genius level. And so what this shows really is that, this, right? Young children are experts at divergent thinking, right? Using their imaginations and not letting any constraints get in the way, right? So constraints might be like, whatever the usual purpose of this object is, right? We know the paperclip is used to attach paper together. Children may not actually know the usual purpose for whatever object they're talking about, so they don't let that constraint get in their way. They're not usually concerned about how others will judge them. Oh, is she going to think that's a good idea? They're not concerned. Right? They also are not concerned about whether or not their idea is practical. Is it going to work? No, we're just coming up with imagination ideas, right? And what we get better at as we age is convergent thinking, right? That evaluation step, right? Unfortunately, sometimes we get so caught up in the evaluation step that we stop ourselves before we evaluate, right? Well, okay, I'm not even going to consider that because I already know it's not going to work. So the trick is, how do we teach young children that evaluation step without taking away the creativity? Because eventually we do need both, right? We need the divergent thinkers to come up with novel solutions to whatever our problems are. And we also need the convergent thinkers to test the practicality of those solutions and be able to adapt them as necessary. And so I have 4 ways that I think nature-based teaching helps hold on to the divergent thinking while developing the convergent thinking. And so one way I think that's very important is that being out in nature activates all of the senses, right? The varied sounds, I don't know if you can hear them through the computer. My filtering is that good. That is blocking them out. But I have bird noises. I have airplanes overhead. I can hear a little bit of the breeze between the trees. And the bird sounds are varied, right? They're not just one bird. I can also hear some chipmunks chirping, right? I can smell things while I'm out here. There's things that I can see, there are textures I can feel. And not only that, but if you're out here each day, those sounds, sights, textures, smells are changing from day to day. So it's inviting curiosity and it's encouraging children to explore with their whole bodies. And I think in our world that is increasingly oral and visual, right? We're getting things mediated through screens. Using your brain to activate all of your senses puts children at a creative advantage. And then processing this information, right? So that you can make decisions, the decisions that we have to make in nature-based programs about what to wear, where it is safe to step, what we want to explore next without getting lost, right? That's the evaluation step. Right. Number 2, being outdoors, being in nature presents the children with challenges that require solutions, right? So 2 weeks ago, the children were working together, a number of children, 6 children or so, working together to kind of build a house. They said they were building a house for them all to share. And they found the perfect log for their house. Unfortunately, this log was about 8 feet long and maybe about 4 inches in diameter and heavy enough that I was unable to lift it, even with the help of my teenage son. But they were going to lift it. And so they started thinking of creative solutions and working through them, right? First, they realized that one child couldn't lift it. So that child decided to drag it. And then they said, well, maybe one person, right? It's really heavy. One person working together isn't going to do it. Let the one person working on by themselves. So let's work together. And so all 6 of them tried on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, lift. Still didn't work. All 6 of them together, right? On the count of 3, let's try dragging it. And so one child says, wait, guys, I know what we can do. And she had all of the children tie some weaving loops together. They're about this size and they're a little bit elastic, to create a rope. And once they had created the rope, she had them slide the rope, and she's directing all the children, slide the rope under the log, wrap it around the log, right? So now they have some bit of a pulley that they're going to use. And then she said, okay, 3 of you, you hold the rope on this side, 3 of you hold the rope on this side. And now we're going to pull on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, pull, and try to drag it. They never did end up figuring out how to drag that log, but they were doing the process of, right, divergent, coming up with as many different solutions as we could, and convergent thinking, right, testing those solutions, and then having an adaptation once those solutions didn't work. All right, 3. Those of us in the nature-based world tend to give the children plenty of unstructured time to play, right? Those challenges, right, of needing to move the log only arise if we give them the time and space to develop. Children need enough time to explore their environments, to find all of the natural loose parts, to decide what they want to do with them, right? To experiment, to test, to refine, to reflect, to return to that same problem on another day or at another week. Right? That's what's going to build this problem-solving thinking process. Wait, I went home, right? Woke up the next morning, had a new idea we could try. That happens to adults, it happens to children. Right? The 4th thing that I really think is important is the calming effect of nature and the outdoors. So if we want children to take creative risks, right, to think of something that's never been thought before and to have something in them that says it's okay, I'm going to test it and it's okay if it fails, right, then we need to lower that affective filter. We need them to feel calm enough that if it doesn't work, right, they're going to try again. If they get frustrated, right, we can take deep breaths and we can stop and we can still attack that problem. Nature has been research proven to reduce stress, to lower cortisol levels, to reduce the symptoms of ADHD, to regulate the sympathetic nervous system, right, which is your heart rate, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, right? So when children can relax, they can be freer to think outside the box and to try to approach those problems in a novel way. So I highly suggest getting your children outside this summer, right, so that they have a habit that will take them into the new school year in the fall, because we want to keep children's wonderful, fantastic imaginations intact, right? Nurture that divergent thinking while also encouraging the problem solving, the testing, the evaluating, the adaptations that mark convergent thinking. And nature-based learning, with its ever-changing stimulus to all of the senses, the challenges it presents, the calming effects, the amount of time just to think of your own problems and solutions will help children think creatively, as long as we give them the time and the space to do it. So get your children outside and then join me here next week for another episode of Wildwood Teaching. I will see you then.